This week on the Three Rings podcast.
Maybe it's not actually a Spotlight monopoly because Spotlight aren't in control of the way performers are locked in.
It's a groundbreaking for me after so many years against equity.
Increasing the fee for performers to exist in the industry.
Overnight, create a two-tier system. Welcome to the 5th episode of the Three Rings podcast, where we discuss entertainment industry issues, news, stories, and give our advice and opinions on various topics. My name's Stuart Bishop, and I'm here with my fellow director, Bailey J. Muir.
So before we dive into today's episode, hit subscribe on the channel, click the like button, and turn up the notification bell up top. Then you'll know all about it when the next episode comes out.
Well, we've got the holy mother of topics today, Bailey, haven't we? It's been hell of a week for Spotlight, and we're going to be documenting, going through the timeline for this week and telling you exactly what happened when Spotlight tried to introduce a brand new premium feature. So why don't you just let the audience know exactly. If you're a performer, you should know what's gone on, but if you don't know, let's do it. I'm going to go through a timeline in a minute, but what's actually happened, Bailey?
So Spotlight essentially announced a rebranding to their platform, to their business, and with this, the main controversy is around a new kind of premium version of Spotlight, obviously with a higher cost for members, loads of additional features that, in their opinion, add value. And there's been all sorts of controversy around, firstly, just increasing the fees for, as I always say in this podcast, increasing the fee for performers to exist in the industry, and also the accessibility of some of those features, whether it's fair that you should have to pay more money to access these things, especially when Spotlight is obviously funding the creation of these extra elements from what they've already got in the normal subscriptions anyhow. There's money being dipped into and used to pay for something that those members aren't going to access. So there's been all sorts going on across social media. Feels like every actor, every dancer in the industry has an opinion on it, even to the point that all of our big unions, publications, etc. have all started to come out with statements, which in this industry is rare, but very much welcomed.
Let's go through the timeline of events. So it starts on the 25th of, it was September, wasn't it? Yeah.
No, October.
We're in November now. October. Bloody hell, I've been on holiday. October. So 25th of October, right? Spotlight announced their new website coming and with new features. Now, at this point, we're thinking, fantastic. And surely any performer who's been, if they're a member of Spotlight, they must be thinking, this is it. They're going to update and make the profiles look great. This can only be good for Spotlight members.
And interestingly enough, what actually came after that when they released on the 27th was no changes whatsoever to the actual profiles. The main changes all came in the subscription model, which was not what anyone was expecting to come. So it's like we had this little 2-day hype period of, oh, this is going to be great for the industry. And the second it was dropped, everyone instantly realised, oh, this isn't good at all.
So that came 2 days later on the 27th of October. And the first, there was a few things. Obviously, the first thing we did notice was that the profiles hadn't changed, which we thought was strange, because if you are, if you're doing a new website, everything new, and it seems like, why wouldn't they have done the profiles? The profiles are the things that are the most prehistoric.
That's it. And the profiles are actually the thing that I would say hold the most value for what you're paying for in Spotlight. Obviously, performers sign up to Spotlight so they have access to the castings. But Spotlight aren't the people who actually have those castings. The value that Spotlight themselves provide is those profiles. That's what talent are paying for. So it feels like that is actually the only thing that the majority of talent would really care about seeing a change to, yet they haven't been touched.
What did they add?
So the whole front page of the website has changed, obviously with the new branding. They've put loads of facts and figures on there about who's on Spotlight, how many castings, all this, which we'll dive into a little bit later. However, the main thing that they have changed is adding in this premium Spotlight feature. Now, this is coming with things like being able to see analytics for when your profile has been viewed, how many times it's been viewed. It has a whole feature about being able to see when a certain casting has less than 150 submissions. And also the main feature that people have kind of been going at online is they've had a sort of like help, wellness, well-being hotline opened, but only for the premium membership.
What it essentially does is suddenly, overnight, create a two-tier system. And we're at a point where, performers, it's getting worse and worse for them. They have no money to then see that, okay, well, I've still got to obviously pay for Spotlight, which they're thinking they have to. And then now there's this premium. It's, to me, it just seems, it seems ridiculous, just to get a few extra things to show you how little chance that you've actually got, which we'll speak about. Bailey's got he's going to do one of his facts and figures, and he's going to break it all down in a bit. But on an actual website view, I want to talk about that first, because I felt the minute I saw that new website, I felt Spotlight as a community, as something that cares for performers, I felt like it disappeared, Bailey, because the website which was launched was not a website which had that feeling. It very much felt like a sales funnel. It very much feels like now it's about selling a service, as opposed to, even though it is always been a service, but it feels like you're coming, it used to feel like you're coming into Spotlight and that's going to now help you with your career, where this now feels a very much, I don't know, it feels a bit Americanized. It feels a bit sort of internet funnels. What's your opinion on the sort of the look of it?
Yeah, it definitely feels like it's been commercialized. I feel like the old Spotlight, even though you could make some like negative comments around it having looked dated, it was that kind of dated feeling that made it felt part of our industry, part of our community, because obviously we are in quite a traditional industry, especially on the theatre side. And there was something about that branding that made it feel like it is right there in the heart of the industry. It makes sense. It's friendly to the community. Now it looks like something that's just trying to make money off the industry, as when you break down the business model, it kind of has been. It's almost like you've like pulled the mask off in a way.
So that was the 27th they launched it. Now, literally on that day, people started going batshit crazy. And we talked about the meltdown from last week. That was minor compared to what happened this week. And influential sort of performing arts people out there. We talked about him last week, Philip Joel. He made comments. There was a load of actors. There was a few casting directors as well. And yeah, tell us, how surprised were you to see this sort of backlash on straight away?
Yeah, I was very surprised to see it, to be honest. And basically the reason for that is that Spotlight has become so crucial to people's careers that it's surprising that anyone would take that risk of, oh, if I say something bad, am I going to get kicked off Spotlight from an actor's side, and equally on the casting director's side, what happens if I get banned from using Spotlight? It's crazy that people dared to upset them. But the good thing is so many people dared that actually Spotlight kind of couldn't do anything bad to anyone speaking. So it's sort of that power in numbers that's allowed it to happen. The more people talk, the more other people will talk. It's creating that knock-on effect. Sometimes the most important thing is just the first person daring to say something. It's super refreshing to see that in our industry. But hopefully this whole situation is going to make it more normal that can happen, because that's what's going to create the improvement we need to see at the end of the day.
The fact that people, and we talked about him last week, Philip Joel, let's talk about the fact that Philip Joel, it's like he's continuing this sort of little campaign to, every now and again to help, because it's risky for him. It's risky for him to be putting his neck on the line. But the more these type of people emerge, it will show the power that performers as a whole have, which we've always known. When we've sat in meetings for dance industry stuff, it's always been, oh, if we all did it together, if everyone said no, but no one ever dares to do it. So it's fantastic, isn't it? Because it's kind of creating almost your Piers Morgan type of panel who could talk about industry issues and people would listen.
There's something really interesting about the Philip Joel thing, where it almost feels like the industry has like voted for him to be the voice. Even though there's obviously been no vote, it's just so many people are in support of him that actually when he says something, everyone listens and everyone backs him up. He's naturally acquired a real power, and it's great that he's using that power for a good thing. Same as there's people on Twitter such as a Dean Johnson, who is more in the musical theatre scene, who's got exactly the same kind of thing. They're people who can activate the community in a really positive way.
What kind of people can do that? How much level of experience do people need to take that authoritative kind of role?
I think it comes with having enough experience and enough network for people to trust them. So obviously someone like a Philip Joel, because he's a choreographer, because he teaches in a lot of the big colleges, he almost has this whole collection of like his students who, of course, for them, like Philip Joel is kind of going to be a mentor. So they back him up. And the more other people see them people backing them up, then they'll get on board the train as well. So I think a lot of it actually comes from being the teacher. It puts you in a position that people trust you and therefore want to know what you think about the situation. I think that's the core of it, more than just you need to have done a certain amount of West End shows or anything like that. It's about the fact you've given knowledge so people trust that knowledge.
Yeah, because if you think about it, you're actually, no matter high up you are still at risk. There's been Hollywood actors before who have spoken out about things, and the next thing, boom, you don't see them for years. So I suppose really you're right. It's not really experience. It's that sort of trust level, and also trust in yourself that if I do this, if I say this, I'm still going to work.
That's it. And this is a difference when you're coming out against like an industry issue such as this whole spotlight thing. It's very different than that, where you could get branded as unprofessional. Obviously, if Philip Joel was to be on a job shooting for a client and suddenly came out slating that client, it's a very different thing than these issues like the point shoes, like Spotlight that he is addressing. There's a difference between the two problems, and this is where it would be very unfair to brand that person unprofessional on that basis. I think that's very similar to yourself with the network. You were never accusing a certain client of someone. So actually the client themselves doesn't need to worry. It's the actual industry voices, the unions, the platforms that need to worry.
Right, let's get back to this timeline. So it was then the 28th. So we are now, we're one day afterwards, and Equity, they released a statement. What did Equity say?
So Equity released a statement saying, "We share frustration of many members at new Spotlight UK tiered membership. We recommend no Equity UK member takes out Premier membership until we understand the reasons for the change and Council has discussed casting policy this November." So obviously with this statement, Equity weren't quite willing to wholeheartedly condemn this new Spotlight tiered system. It was more just that they want to ask some questions, they want to come to understand it. So it's not as concrete as I would like to see from Equity personally. However,
what would you like to see?
I would have liked them to just straight up have gone, we encourage none of our members to get this. Not any sort of sentiment of, we encourage it for now, but maybe in November we'll say, actually, it's fine to go and get. It's like we knew at that point that it was wrong. You don't need to ask questions. Absolutely encourage going and having a meeting with Equity, with Spotlight in a few weeks' time to discuss it and make sure they don't do something similar in the future. But there wasn't a need for that sort of stalling of, we'll revisit it. However, fairness where it's due, we'll come to it in a little bit later, they have now become concrete on it.
I felt Equity should have said, yes, they should have been more definite, but they also should have said because we believe that this. It was just very kind of safe and, what we expect from Equity. However, there is a difference with this one. This is the first time for me that I feel like I remember Equity coming out against Spotlight.
It definitely is significant. Within the industry, it's always kind of felt like Equity and Spotlight kind of prop each other up. I know they've always kind of been listed on each other's websites as like partners and stuff like this. So when Equity first came out, it was like, whoa, the house has just divided. It's a very big statement to have made. And maybe that's why they didn't go quite so concrete at first. because it's a huge deal for them to have even said anything. So you can kind of reason it, especially where it's come to now, where it's become concrete, as we'll get to. Fair play to Equity, they've done the right thing. It's just we'd hope they get there a lot quicker. And maybe from this situation, this might give them that boost of confidence of, do you know what, we are right in what we're thinking. We could have just jumped the gun at that point and taken confidence, done what the members absolutely wanted, not told the members, we hear you want this dealing with, so we'll deal with it in a little bit.
When Equity say they're gonna enter discussions, enter talks, it's always like, this is, let's stick it on the agenda for the big equity talk once a year and all this. It's, nothing's ever going to happen. So this is, it's a bit groundbreaking. It's a groundbreaking for me after so many years against equity. So then the stage on the 31st of October, the stage included in their news and mail shots the news of performers discussed and, being against it. Now I thought again, wow. It felt like cancel culture. It felt like, this is it. Are we going to see the Spotlight CEO come out and resign? That's what it felt like when I saw the stage including it in all their stuff.
It's huge to see the stage reported on a controversy around an organisation like that. For example, it's crazy to say that because obviously their job is to report on things, but it feels like there's certain issues that they don't want to touch on. For example, that situation we had with Spotlight where it all went down and they were getting backlash for that. The stage never picked up that situation. So it was a huge deal to actually see this pop up on their website. In fairness to them, it was a brilliant article. They've gone and got statements from your Philip Joes, from your Dean Johnsons, all of these voices. It's like the stage were really on board with, we need to get this news to performers. We need to build this sort of revolt that was starting to go on in the industry. It was like the stage, even though our guess is like reporting, you should be impartial. The stage were trying to get word out. They were trying to build the movement, I would say.
You said that they need to be impartial. Why do you think they need to be impartial?
I always feel like when you're a reporter, your job is just to deliver the facts. And even though I guess going and getting these statements is like delivering the facts, the fact they've chosen these certain voices to go to but haven't got anything of an opposing side, it kind of feels like the article was tailored to go, we want to have the performers hear these voices.
Now, that same day, the CDG, they came out as well. What did they say?
So the Casting Directors Guild statement was, while we do not support a tiered Spotlight UK membership system, we want to reassure actors that it will make no difference to our members' casting processes or their decisions on who to consider. All actors will appear in searches and can be suggested for all roles as before. Now, from my side as an agent, great that the CDG decided to say something. The more backlash, the better. However, I don't know that the CDG have taken enough accountability there. Even where they're at right now, I'm still not quite happy with it. And this is where we get into a whole conversation around what actually gives Spotlight its value. Where does the supply and demand sit? Spotlight doesn't actually really control either end of that. The actors, the dancers, the performers are the supply, and the casting directors are the demand. They're the ones that bring the castings in. If Spotlight didn't have castings, the performers wouldn't want to pay for Spotlight. There's no point in them being there. The only way I feel can actually effectively put an end to this, where Spotlight is starting to get called a monopoly, is for the casting directors to start to remove their castings. Obviously, the CDG can dictate that. Reason for this being, there's been calls for performers to boycott Spotlight. However, when you look at a supply and demand model, that in no way is actually going to benefit those performers, because when they leave, you actually just increase the values of the ones that are then left within Spotlight. For example, if you look at like the car manufacturing industry, right now there's probably like 50 major manufacturers of cars. However, if they all went bust and there was only like Ford left, Ford could suddenly charge a hell of a lot more for cars because everyone still wants a car. If you're the final performer left on Spotlight, but all the castings are still on Spotlight, you can charge whatever the hell you want. And this is where Spotlight, you could say, have the performers locked in. They can't leave. But actually, it's not technically Spotlight. It's the casting directors' castings that have the performers locked in. There's a strange balancing out there where Spotlight aren't actually necessarily in control of the supply and demand.
So, 1st of November, Spotlight officially paused their premium feature. They basically did a U-turn, but they've paused it. They haven't said, they haven't apologized. They've said we've heard and we've listened, so we will pause it, which means it could come back. It very much feels like the Champions...
the Super League.
It feels very much like the Super League. It's kind of on pause, but it's wanting to come back at any point. So that happened. Everyone's, I suppose, had thought, brilliant, this is great, fantastic. That's what they probably thought. Other minds probably thought like us, thinking, well, you've said pause. Why aren't you efficient? Why aren't you coming out against it? That would be the absolute thing, basically. And then just raise, maybe then, because of this, we, blah, 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 cost of living, we're going to raise the premium, the normal one up £10 or something, even though they're making millions. So equity, what did they then say about this?
So Equity have made probably the best statement that I've ever seen Equity make. And this is where I'm like, actually, I forgive them for that earlier statement that weren't quite concrete. So I'll read it out for you. A pause in the rollout of Premier is welcome, but the only good outcome of a reconsideration is abandoning the idea of tiered membership benefits on Spotlight. This episode leads to questions about the whole Spotlight model. An Equity Council will have a wide-ranging review in November of our policy toward casting platforms. This will take account of the Premier rollout and the casting survey which has recently concluded. Well done to every brave member and industry professional who has spoken out so far. Now, that point where Equity have taken this beyond just a tiered membership and said it calls into question the whole Spotlight model is so overdue and so good to see.
Let's go back to the casting director, because what did Mark Summers say? Mark Summers said,
during the cost of living crisis, casting sites worldwide should not be asking actors to pay higher subscription charges. This is totally unacceptable and inappropriate at this time. Now, total support of Mark Summers on that statement. However, there's a whole question here of, if that's your belief, should your casting still be getting put through those systems? Because that's what enables these systems to keep going ahead. Fairness where it's due with Matt Summers, he doesn't only put his casting through Spotlight, which a lot of people do. All of Matt Summers' stuff you can find on social media, you can find on his website, etc. So maybe it's not so much the case with a Matt Summers. There are alternatives. You don't have to be on Spotlight to get access to them. But I would say probably 90% of the casting directors are almost exclusive to Spotlight with the majority of their castings. And that's what's got performers locked in. There's definitely an argument to be had here that maybe it's not actually a Spotlight monopoly because Spotlight aren't in control of the way performers are locked in. It's the casting directors that have got the performers locked into Spotlight. And in a sense, it's the performers who have got the casting directors locked into Spotlight because that's where they all are. The two are caught in the middle. It feels very similar to maybe about 10, 15 years ago. There was a whole legal situation with Spotify where they were accused of being a monopoly. And they eventually got away with it. And the whole basis of the legal argument was they've not done anything to make every single music artist have to be on Spotlight. The reason they're there is just because the service is so good. Spotify aren't in control of everyone coming on board. They're not trying to make that happen. You could very much say the same with Spotlight. If that is the best casting platform, that's why all the casting directors use it. And because all the casting directors use it, all the performers use it. Spotlight possibly aren't quite instigating in enough of a way to really be called a monopoly. It's a very interesting argument. There's something in the way it's locked together that isn't right. But as to who's responsible is very, very hard to say.
We're trying to raise this argument of auditions should be paid. So that's one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is that performers are paying for auditions. And that's where we're at, really. It's a performer should not have to pay to get onto a platform which gives them a chance of getting a job. Now, this brings us perfectly to what chances actually do you have as a performer going on there. There were some very interesting stats on their website. Why don't you take us through all those and give your conclusion?
So, as per new stats published on the spotlight.co.uk website, upwards of 90,000 performers are registered in the Spotlight database, whilst approximately 2,500 roles are available each month. When we run these stats against each other, that means Spotlight on average only have enough roles to serve 2.7% of their members per month. This means statistically, members should deem success as booking one job per 3-year period. In consideration of these statistics, it is difficult to foresee Spotlight membership creating return on investment for the majority of performers, and subsequently raises a world of questions around the ethics of the business model behind casting platforms.
When you see these stats, it creates a whole different problem, doesn't it?
Yeah, this is it. It starts to call into question, I would say, whether it's actually effective to be on a casting platform. Even how effective is just the whole existence of a casting platform, to be completely honest. It's like that whole thing that we started to get into before, the facts and figures of the way there's a lock-in between the performers and the casting directors. It feels like any casting platform, even if it's not Spotlight, the best one is always going to rise to the top and create this same ecosystem where it clicks in. And that then enables them to exploit that fact and do these pay to be on the platform, pay for a premium membership, all these tiered systems. It's getting that catch going on that they're not necessarily responsible for, that they can pick up on. And when you then boil this down to the chance the performers actually have, what is the point in paying for that platform? On the casting director's end, surely it must be a bit of a pain in the arse to have that many performers coming forward trying to get a job that you just cannot possibly actually give everyone a look, never mind a fair look. There's too many people there for too little roles within the industry. The casting platform model really just can't be supported because the supply and demand is so disproportionate to each other.
Spotlight, you just don't need to be on it because your agent's going to get that casting anyway, and they're going to put you up for it. Whether it's, we don't want our people being put through the Spotlight link because the Spotlight links looks terrible. We want them going through the link through to our website, innit?
Yeah, this is it. As a performer, you don't need Spotlight as long as you've got a good agent. And that should, in theory, mean that, okay, if you don't have an agent, then you do need to have Spotlight. Right now, that's the case, and this is back to the argument where, is it actually the casting directors who are ultimately responsible? If the casting directors all were like Matt Summers, where their stuff goes on their website, even the non-represented performers no longer have to have Spotlight. I really feel like the casting directors have all the power to end it, but I don't think they actually realise that they have that power. I don't think it's that they're intentionally making a decision to support Spotlight. I think it's just a lack of sort of the overview of what's going on, where they don't know that they can undo the entire thing. They are the people who can make it fairer for performers.
We've been developing this, and we're going to talk about this very soon, of casting directors. What is their true role, and are they doing it effectively? Because as a casting director, in my head, it would be the worst thing ever to get 5,000 suggestions, where if I'm a skilled casting profession and I've been doing it for a while, I should know. I mean, we don't need to go into this now, but they shouldn't need thousands and thousands of suggestions. They should know who's who and who to cast, don't you think?
Yeah, for sure. This is it. Obviously, like Spotlight, they're now saying they have 90,000 performers upwards on their database. You can't expect a casting director to know 90,000 performers, but a casting director's never going to need to book 90,000. There'll be people in there who a casting director, unfortunately, is never going to have any interest in seeing. As long as they know the people who they actually think are good enough to get put on their jobs and who interest them, that is enough. You don't need this whole backlog of every single person who exists. This is where they need to pick and choose who they like. Every casting director is going to like different people. there'll be someone who a Carmel Corcoran books that a Matt Summers wouldn't give a second look to. So they don't both need the exact same database of people. There's something here to be said about almost more scouting needs to be done within the industry than just every single thing that goes on. Every person's name gets chucked in a hat, and it becomes like the lucky piece of paper that gets pulled out lands the job. It's like enough decisions aren't actually being made to get the best person.
I feel like they're being, dare I say, a little bit lazy, you know? Well, I'll put this out and then I'll get... But it feels counterproductive, it does, you know, putting a casting out and then getting so many suggestions, you know, allowing the agents to do, in a sense, a lot of the work when they're not ever going to, you know, most of those suggestions are never going to be, they're not even going to be seen.
This is it. And is it lazy or is it overworking? Because then equally you could say if you're seeing 3,000 for a job, you can book one person. You're doing too much work on that job. It's like you can say it either way. It definitely, there's ways it makes their lives easier and ways it makes their lives a hell of a lot harder.
I take that back. I actually think it is. You're right. It's overworking. It's doing stuff which isn't necessary. A Hollywood film, a big Hollywood casting director is not going to go to Steven Spielberg with 1,000
potential lead roles.
Yeah, potential lead roles. They're going to go with, right, we've made a short list of maybe, 5 to 10 or even, 3, because they know, they have an idea, right, well, it's an action role, so we need this type of person. Right, well, an action role, it's either going to be, I don't know, The Rock or Vin Diesel or Schwarzenegger or Stallone or whoever is an action. They're not going to stick in there Adam Sandler.
And this is all linked into the work that goes on before they present that list to Steven Spielberg, to the client. In the highest Hollywood level, they almost are already on a scouting model. They're not inviting 1,000 people to the room to try out, to then go, these were the 5 best from the first audition. We'll show the client these and get them to a recall with the client. The way the Hollywood casting directors actually find them people is consuming every film that comes out, consuming every TV series, and scouting from there, so they don't need to get them in the room for a first round. They can just go straight for a screen test, straight for a recall. It's about what goes on to actually create that shortlist. Again, there's too much work being done at this level. You should know who's out there, and if you don't know who's out there, then maybe you need to turn up at class and watch who's in base. Maybe you need to turn up and watch a West End show. Maybe you need to go to the National and see some actors. Even social media, everyone's posting content on there. Actors post monologues, dancers post dance videos. There's ways to find people without needing everyone to come to you for every single job.
So what do you think the future is there for Spotlight?
There's 2 sides of me with it. There's like a bit of a negative side that I think it may actually all just disappear and go back to normal and people forget it's happened. Because if Spotlight decide that they're going to stop it, I can't see them putting out a big announcement of we're no longer doing this, because it wouldn't be in their interest to promote that fact. They've already got that negative press of they wanted to do it. They can't benefit from saying they're no longer going to. So I don't think they'll make a big deal of it. It will just slip away and never come back, and no one will really notice, and eventually people will forget. We'll keep paying the normal subscriptions and the industry will just resort back to normal. However, there is a positive side of me that hopes this is the turning point. And especially this announcement that's come from Spotlight of they're putting it on pause. I feel like that might be in a direct response to Equity's first statement, where Equity referenced a meeting with Spotlight in November. And now Equity saying it calls into question the whole Spotlight model. I would really hope this can start to become a movement from Equity of dispelling the need for casting platforms, becoming a movement to encourage performers to recognise the chances they have, as we've discussed today, what they can gain, helping to educate casting directors on the amount of power they actually hold over these and the amount of input and factors they actually give to these casting platforms existing and creating what is now getting called a monopoly. It feels like a whole campaign could be born that educates and brings forward a new industry that can actually fix these problems and benefit everyone. That's what I would hope to see. How about yourself? What do you think's coming next?
Yes, it will probably just sort of disappear into, we probably won't hear much more again. it just makes me think, where is this all going? And in fact, I know we've spoke about it, and we're probably going to talk about it in the future. You've got to really scale back. And I think we can have one of these facts and figures, little videos from you in the future about actually who is Spotlight and what, in my head, it used to be, Spotlight's this little company and they do so well. It's for the industry. And then during the pandemic, we sort of looked into them and we could see how much money they were making. And then actually, Spotlight is just one of. Why don't you just quickly explain? We don't need to go into too much, but Spotlight, they're not just an independent company on their own, are they?
Oh no! So Spotlight, I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, got bought out by a US company called Talent Systems. Now, Talent Systems already had a load of their own casting platforms. Spotlight's now just kind of been added to that family. So even in its own business environment, it is part of multiple casting platforms. Obviously, Spotlight then has partners where it clicks in with other casting networks around Europe. For example, it has a good relationship with the casting network in France. So it's got all sorts of other things feeding into it. And obviously, just of the model of a casting platform as well, just within the UK, we then have Amandi, we've got Star Now, you've got like CastWeb. Even things like a 5678 Facebook group is at a similar basis. Obviously, performers aren't paying for that, but there's still a hell of a lot of back and forth going on in there. This whole casting, kind of having a middleman in the casting process is a huge thing. Spotlight aren't the only form of it. There's a whole sort of industry area that needs to be discussed and explored, whether it needs to exist, if it does need to exist, is it currently existing in the best way possible? Is there an alternative that's better?
If Spotlight is owned by a company, they've then got to pay some of their profit to that company. So that, everything gets squeezed. So then at the very bottom, it's the performers who get squeezed.
And there's something about just having a profit margin that feels wrong. If you're a platform that's intended to just facilitate people getting jobs, should you be making money on that? If you are making money on that, surely you're actually kind of half kicking into the territory of being an agent to those people. That's not what it is. So maybe there is even a scenario where the casting platform should be non-profit. Yeah, they need to make a bit of money to pay for their staff and pay for their systems, but any additional profit should be invested back in, not used to just create profit for shareholders, CEOs, etc. There's something quite wrong about it. For example, the nearest thing to a Spotlight in most industries is like going to the job centre. Technically, the job centre really work like an agency. They're not going to charge you to join the job centre. So in that comparison, is it right that Spotlight charge you to join Spotlight? Is it, even if they need to make money, is there a different way they can make their money like the job centre would?
Well, lots of things there for people to discuss. If you've got your opinion, please put it down below. I feel like this is going to be something that's just going to keep going, and we're going to keep on it. We love to expose and we love to report on these type of things because it's, the industry needs to be ever changing, and it hasn't been. It's been standing still for a very long time. And it does very much feel like the fall of Rome is happening right now, because once you start questioning Spotlight, then, I'm sure it won't be long before Spotlight questions equity and casting directors. Like we've seen all this week, suddenly everyone's jumping ship again, casting saying, well, we don't charge for our castings. I feel like it's going to get messy.
Oh, it's definitely going to get messy. So everyone that's always presented as being best friends with each other, all these groups, these unions, suddenly everyone's divided. They're all putting their own statements. It looks like no one's working together. And in a sense, maybe no one working together is the only thing that can actually bring a solution, because we can't support each other's wrongdoings anymore. It's like everything's now out on the table to be discussed, which is great.
Let's see what happens with Spotlight. Let's see if there's any more news coming in the following weeks. Bailey, any final thoughts from you?
Yeah, my only other thing left to say is If you've enjoyed this episode and want to join us in future to explore more of these industry issues and see our insights into them, hit subscribe on the channel, give us a like on the video if you've enjoyed it if you're still here, and click the notification bell so next week you know all about it when we come back with more of these thoughts.
So there you go. Thank you very much. I'll see you soon, Bailey, and we'll see you next week.